Resident Evil. Now, if you don't know Resident Evil, really? Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a quick synopsis so I could get to the point of the video. The Resident Evil franchise started out in the 90s as a survival horror, and up towards the third one, it started to phase out. And once the fourth one came around, the franchise went towards what most FPS games are these days, which is running and gunning with no meaningful impact or story. Like Warzone, Apex Legends, Fortnite. Is that even an FPS? I'm gonna assume it is an FPS game, but games like that don't really have anything to do but just shoot and run. Though they help bring back the survival horror roots that we really loved back in the old Resident Evil games, with RE7 and the latest one, Resident Evil Village.
Give your meat a good old rub. That's it. Nice and hot. Hot and spicy meat. Yeah, boy.
Resident Evil was in a sore spot these last few years. Resident Evil 4 was a breath of fresh air the series really needed, and Resident Evil 5 was a fun game, but that's where things started to take a turn for the worse. And look, I don't know about you guys, but RE4 is where the game started to become over the top.
Are you out of your mind?
I knew you'd be fine if you landed on your butt.
Spicy meat.
And Capcom started turning the series into an action game with Operation Raccoon City, and they released RE6, which fans were really not happy with that game, with the focus totally on action instead of survival horror, little to no puzzle, and many more quick time events. RE7 was a turning point for the series back to their survival horror roots, with focus on ammo and item management, enemies that couldn't be killed and stalked you, and puzzles were a focus of the game that made you think. The series has gone back to full steam ahead with the survival horror, with RE2 being a terrifying reimagining of a classic game, and RE3 shaping to be the same, but not as good as RE2. But for the sake of the title of this video, is Resident Evil really a masterpiece? Let's take a trip back to memory lane, back in 1996. Resident Evil 1. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the original is unbearably corny by today's standards.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
She knows damn well I ain't trying to hang out with a crusty ass.
But I would still fire up the OG/director's cut any day. Resident Evil showed what it means to be a survival horror game. Now, however, more than 20 years later, it is not as impressive as it was in the past. Though the atmosphere and the story are still pretty solid to me, but the gameplay mechanics don't feel as evolved as they do in the games that follow for the fans of the series. Resident Evil is a great time, don't get me wrong, fit with fixed cameras, in short supplies of resources, and isolated atmosphere seen in other titles. With that said, it's not the best Resident Evil game to start with. The second entry improves upon the first in almost every way, and the fourth game comes with a complete overhaul to the gameplay. So I'm rating this as a director's cut, as that was the definitive version Capcom released. 2 scenarios with 2 completely different versions, which is fairly challenging. So I'm gonna give the first Resident Evil game a B-. Not a bad start, to be honest. Resident Evil 2. So if you want to make an argument, what's better, the original or the remake? Well, in my opinion, in terms of overall content, I would say the original Resident Evil 2 is better, because the zapping system was something that did not happen often at all in the PS1 days. You had 4 scenarios that had their differences, even if by today's standards, they are similar. Enemy placements and items in random places was a game changer, and the N64 had an item randomizer that is still amazingly fun to play, coupled up with the fact that it's one of the best direct sequels in gaming of all time, so that's why I'm gonna go with the original Resident Evil 2. But here's where I defend the remake.
Because according to the encyclopedia...
Because the remake is a great game in my opinion. It's honestly one of the best games to come out in this entire generation. I'm not exaggerating, but it is. The graphics are all pretty, and even though people online complained about Claire's face model, it never really bothered me to the point that I'd say it's shit. I do enjoy the police station a lot, and the redesign is so good that I struggle to figure out whether I like the original more or not.
I think you take me for a joke!
The sewers are better, but I enjoyed the old lab more. The new lab looked like everything was sterilized completely all the time, which makes sense, but at the same time, the OG lab felt like it was ran by a mad scientist. I can't really describe it, but something just felt really off during that atmosphere.
Deja vu, I just been in this
What I don't like about the remake though is how the zombies are just, well, bullet sponges.
You gotta be kidding me.
While I was doing my S+ runs for the Infinity weapons, it was annoying to see zombies still alive and kicking after I pretty much let a whole clip into them. You were basically forced to go for knee shots and run as fast as opposed to killing the zombies that were in your way for that speed run. I also don't like the new IV zombies and prefer the old versions. I also miss the dog version of G4, although I don't mind the new version. They also butchered the second run scenarios, degrading it into something that felt tacked on at the last minute. In the end, I really love both versions of this game and randomly would play either one of them when I need an RE fix to this day. But I gotta go with the original RE2. It's flat out better to me besides the presentation and the graphics in my opinion, so I'm gonna give the original RE2 a 9.5 out of 10 and the remake gets a 9 out of 10. In all summary, this game is just a total classic. A little challenging on hard mode, lots of extra modes, and a good story, so this game gets an A for me. Resident Evil 3. Now, like the RE2, if we're talking about the remake was a bit of a disappointment if you ask me.
Hello? Brad, is that you?
No, this is Patrick.
Let me grab my...
I come for your pickle.
Since not only did they rush the release of the game, they also cut and removed a lot of content that made the original really memorable, such as the cemetery/park, which was infested with hunters, and the gravedigger boss fight, the clock tower area as such, not to mention they turned Nemesis into a glass cannon. In which you could easily down it with a single grenade or explosive barrels. Like, basically, he was just not that terrifying to me.
Bitch can't even swim.
Are we gonna pretend you're relevant, or are we gonna face the fact that your existence is equivalent to a grain of sand? What?
Another thing is that there was a lot of wasted opportunities during the remake. As such, during the time when Jill was infected, the player could have taken control of Carlos as he makes his way to where Jill is. But what also worries me is that the hack of this team who handled RE3 is also going to be remaking the RE4, in which they will probably retcon the Plaga Parasite origins, which I hope that does not happen, but that's another game we're going to be talking about later. To summarize RE3, it's a great game that was like a chapter 2 for Resident Evil 2, very challenging on hard if you're going for the Nemesis fights. Mercenary mode is great in my opinion. The story was pretty okay, so I'm gonna give it a B+. Resident Evil Code Veronica X. The story is a nice little roller coaster ride, a classic RE action with odd but cool boss fights. Ash Forge were more interesting than the Redfield reunion. Like, this is the first must-play in the series. Originally released on Dreamcast in 2000, the game follows Claire Redfield after the events of Resident Evil 2 and Nemesis. It's the first title in the series to feature a real-time 3D environments, allowing cameras to move in ways it wasn't able to before. The Dreamcast's poor sales fell back on Code Veronica when it was released. However, although the game was eventually ported to PS2 and GameCube, the Dreamcast graphics fell outdated by the time it arrived. Today, however, Code Veronica is still an excellent Resident Evil game and an absolute must-own for Dreamcast fans. So my rating for this game is actually a solid B. Next on this list is Resident Evil Gaiden, or I don't know how you say it. And yes, I've beaten this game before, and I gotta say, the story is meh. Combat was a little fun for a Game Boy Advance color game. I believe people for a long time said they disliked it because they only heard it was bad and agreed because they didn't want to be uninformed on these are the bad Resident Evil games side of things.
Basic.
I mean, at the time this game came out, there wasn't many videos or actual reviews. That's why I'm actually making this video right now, to check if this game is actually any good. And to this day, many people haven't played it. So I would say the stigma for this game is hugely undeserved. Besides combat, Gaiden feels like a thought experiment in taking the classic RE to the most uncomfortable extreme. Half the items and keys are hidden, not enough ammo to kill everything, some rooms contain no useful items at all. Honestly, it's pretty spectacular how well balanced between availability of ammo, number of enemies, and actually needing a bit of skills in combat. Because the combat in this game was somewhat shit, but I can understand why it was made that way due to limitations. Plus, the background and the battle scenes were surprisingly varied and animated. But I found out if you adjust your view so the enemy's weak points was right on the edge of the screen, the battle becomes at least 90% easier. I'm kind of confused as to why the fanbase hates it so much. I mean, it's nothing special, but it's far from like the worst game I've ever played. I mean, hell, I've played worst Resident Evil games, and that's the next game we're going to be talking about. Resident Evil Survivor. Played this without the light gun and mostly played it for the lore, and I totally dreaded all my 4 playthroughs. This is probably the game that I would not recommend anyone playing. So this game is the biggest F in the franchise. Like, this is F. No, don't play this game. Next on this list is the 2002's Resident Evil. Now, in my opinion, this is how a remake is to be done. What I like about it is how hard this game punishes you for doubling back and visiting old rooms, and do it often enough and zombies you thought were dead may come back. Dogs may leap in front of windows and potentially zombies may come crashing through, turning a room that you thought was clear into a murder hallway. Pretty challenging on medium in my opinion. Post-game adds 3 additional modes. The Xbox One and PS4 remaster is crisp as fuck, and it shows that the rendering Capcom did for this game has aged very well. It's the pinnacle of what a remake of a game should be, keeping what made the original so good. Adding things that make sense, a mulligan for things that don't make sense, director's cut music, and a fair amount of dialogue for example, and adding quite a bit of a replayability with bonus outfits, weapons, and modes. With the HD remake adding leaderboards that adds even more replayability for people wanting to beat their own times or someone else's time. It's just flawless, and in my opinion, it deserves an S. So go play this game, because next on this list, I am not sure if many people want to play this game, but the next game is Resident Evil 0. Now look, it's a good game, but that one gripe flaw that I have with this game is the inventory system. Now look, I don't know if it's just me or if I'm just a suck-ass gamer.
Get shit on! Your ass!
But let me explain. Because on one hand, it's neat, I can leave anything almost anywhere all the time, but doing so creates a shitload of backtracking, more so than other RE games I've played so far. It doesn't help I couldn't find a pouch upgrade, which I'm gonna assume there isn't any, but please do correct me if I'm wrong. And I kept on finding myself exchanging stuff between the 2 characters, and then dropping things even though I could have really used the said item. I think this is the only RE game where I never carried health items till the very end of the game, to be honest. Story-wise, I thought it was alright. I don't think it's bad, but it's not amazing either. I mean, I'll admit, I was more interested in the files and backstories than Rebecca's and Billy's trust into each other. The co-op was a pretty good idea, yet it was only exclusive to an AI teammate. My recommendation, pick a teammate you like, leave the other in the save room, and then you have the classic challenge. The item drop system was a pain in the ass, yet realistic, so should I really complain? So the story was okay, certainly explained the main question stated in the intro, so it's a B in my opinion. It's not that bad, but it's also not that good either. And next on this list, I'm gonna be ranking these 2 Resident Evil games as just one, since they're kind of the same in my humble opinion. And what I'm talking about is the Umbrella Chronicles and the Dark Side Chronicles. Because yes, I know they're both on-rail shooter games, and they aren't for everyone, especially the younger generations, I feel. And at the time of release of this game on Wii, also I think PS3 later on released it as well, they were pretty damn cool, testing the possibilities for more interactive experience and eventually VR. But the real thing I want to address that makes this a great experience, the pacing, the story, the lore, small parts have weaved their way into the other parts of the RE universe, hence the book or the movie series. The fundamental gameplay is still solid, the graphics of course, I'm not gonna bullshit you guys on that, it's kind of outdated.
Who the fuck are you?
However, at that time, the textures were really amazing back then. It was an incredible immersive experience. A remaster of these games in VR still on the rails, but with full camera control would be amazing to see. I don't know, maybe I'm just a Resident Evil fan who just appreciates all the games for what they are. However, I think all hardcore fans of the RE universe should at least give these 2 games a shot. Just give it one shot, and if you don't like it, then don't play it. So my rankings for these 2 games, I'm gonna give Umbrella Chronicles a C and Dark Side Chronicles a C+. I think that's just fair, so yeah, C and C+. The next game I want to talk about is Resident Evil Outbreak Outbreak File 1 and 2. And I have to say, these games were so ahead of their time. Outbreak did so damn much, and the only thing that ruined it for me is that it was developed several years too fucking early. Super slow load times and a limited exposure to the PS2 players that had broadband killed the freaking game. But if you don't believe me, just watch some gameplay videos on YouTube. They will speak for themselves, I promise you that. I'd say that playing solo is as hard and worse than any Souls games. Class-based co-op before Overwatch and Apex, zombie co-op before Left 4 Dead, and online multiplayer before Halo freaking 2. So I'm gonna give this game a B+. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna give it a B+. If online right now, maybe A+, but right now I'm just gonna give it a B+. So I think that's fair already. That's fair enough. And the next game on this list is Resident Evil 4. It's tough to articulate how much of an impact Resident Evil 4 has had on gaming.
I have an idea. Since you're here, why don't I introduce you to it? It should keep you busy.
You ever made love to a man?
Originally released on the GameCube in 2005, Resident Evil 4 has since been ported to countless of other platforms. I mean, no matter what console or tricked out gaming PC you have, there's a way to play Resident Evil 4. And for good reasons, of course. Although Resident Evil 3 showed a massive leap forward in terms of graphics, it pushed the limits of the original PlayStation in 1999, but with more powerful hardware within its system. Resident Evil 4 switched the fixed camera angle of the first 3 games to an over-the-shoulder perspective. The tighter focus on the action worked wonders back in 2005, though Capcom took it a little too far for me, as demonstrated in both Resident Evil 5 and 6. Resident Evil 4 is a game teetering on the edge, perfecting the formula Capcom had been crafting for nearly a decade when the original game was released. Combat was fun and completely different experience, lots of cool modes and side stories. I mean, what more do you want me to say about this game? It's legendary. It deserves an S for me, which I am not surprised why many people love this game, because the next game, I am sure not many people really do love this game, because the next one is Resident Evil 5. Okay, I know many people have reservations about this game, but hear me out. The game remains challenging throughout, it's a good thrill ride overall, and honestly, back then, I didn't care about the boulder punching. I mean, I thought it was fucking hilarious back then, but again, it's a video game. What do you expect?
What the fuck am I playing with?
Mercenaries is pretty challenging on solo and fun with a friend. Online was pretty fun too. The story puts a great conclusion on Wesker. I just wish the final boss fight was more challenging to me. Like Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 5 is too heavily focused on action. Upon release, however, it didn't feel as dated as its eventual sequel. Instead of returning to the slow survival horror, Capcom laid into the formula that made Resident Evil 4 so successful, ditching the scares in favor of the fast-paced action. Although ammunition and item management are still an aspect of Resident Evil 5, it was pretty clear that combat is like the clear focus for this game, and for that, Resident Evil 5 is a decent game. It has its few issues here and there when it comes to the cover system and its teammate AI. But overall, the shooting is fun, the graphics are gorgeous, the story is compelling to say the least, and as I grow older, I look back at all these Resident Evil games and I can just appreciate all of them for their own merits. So I'm gonna give this game, honestly, an A-. And I hope you guys don't hate me for that. Again, this is just my opinion, my humble opinion. And if you think otherwise, or if you think I'm wrong, then put your thoughts in the comments and we can have a healthy discussion. Alright? Good. And the next game is Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Now, Operation Raccoon City was super fun. I really like it as a spin-off. I've admittedly had more fun with its multiplayer with campaign and heroes mode than the RE6's multiplayer everything. I honestly think the hate for it was too harsh, because at the time of 2011 and 2012, people were itching so much for a remake and got disappointed that Operation Raccoon City is what they got. I mean, its major flaw for me was the online that got too buggy as fuck at times and the unfair team balancing. But all else, it's a pretty good game for fun. fun. Though I wish the rest of the Spec Ops campaign wasn't a paid DLC, so I haven't tried them and I can't give my opinion about it. It's a nice little shooter set in the RE world. The teams were very showy. It was interesting to take on the baddies with the Ghost Recon equipment. At the end, I would say Operation Raccoon City had good concept, but the execution was bad. And I say that because of the bad hit detection for hitboxes, unbalanced characters, being able to revive infected teammates after shooting them in the head or killing them, lots and lots of bullet sponge enemies, Spec Ops being locked behind a DLC paywall. It was still a great game, though I love playing as Vector ghosting zombies and visiting key locations like Raccoon City Hall, and the hospital in HD was enjoyable for me. The game had massive potential, but it was just too bad that Operation Raccoon City was just outsourced to the SOCOM developers, because they make a lot and lots of great tactical team-based shooters but just had no experience with zombies. So I'm gonna give Operation Raccoon City a C+. The concept was good, but the execution needed more work. Next on this list is Resident Evil 6. Now, I'm gonna be a bit petty on this one. Because I hated this when it came out. Then they fixed the camera and the controls, good sequel, but it just felt like overkill to me. There were very few horror moments, but after a couple of scenarios, I just stopped caring. Loyal fans rode hard for this game, but when the first release came out, critics complained that it diverged too far from the classic survival horror genre and played more like an action game. It also doubles the numbers of campaigns from like 2 to 4, and some argue this spreads it too thin, even for me as well. The gaming company sold RE6 on its diversity of play, but ultimately the split campaigns just didn't deliver, even for me. The actions leave so many unresolved questions, lacks a common thread, which makes the playing experience feel so cheap. But while it has some issues here and there, RE6 still has incredibly good graphics, good plotting as an action game. It's not a good RE game, but it's a fantastic action game, and online modes were pretty good here and there, so I'm gonna give this game a B. Yeah, I'm gonna be a bit nice, so I'm gonna give it a B. Resident Evil Revelations. The UI in this game is a bit distracting to me, and I really hated the whole television show presentation. It just got in my way. The story's kind of the same old song and dance, except a bigger city is destroyed in the past. Honestly, this game was just too convoluted for its own good, but hey, the gameplay is fun, but the enemies are bland looking but challenging, I'll say. The raid mode pushes the grade into a B-. Resident Evil Revelation Part 2. Claire and Barry's little boat trip is presented far better than the first Revelations. The story tries a bit harder to focus on the internal character drama and slows the plot down in a good way. I think it was a good direction because in all honesty, RE characters lack a lot of character depth. But I guess that's why we have fan fictions, right?
How many people can do your job, Dave? 10,000? I want Pornhub to shred your resume.
Daddy, chill.
I think you owe her an apology.
I'm sorry.
No. Again. Better.
Apologize. So honestly, I'm gonna give Resident Evil Revelation Part 2 a B+. Biohazard 7 or Resident Evil 7, aka Louisiana Chainsaw Massacre. There, I said it. After playing it, I have to admit, it was fucking awesome. Then again, its replayability is stuck to the Madhouse mode. Collectibles and DLC just like every other game out there. The added content is pretty decent, save for the Uncle Joe Gator boxing tournament, also known as the end of Zoe. So honestly, this game is an A, just for the fact that they brought back the survival horror we loved back then. Resident Evil Resistance. Honestly, it's really just okay. There's need to be a little more balancing, content and less concentration on loot boxes. Like seriously, just getting an emote or skin takes you like 2 hours unless you're using booster packs, which are free for micros, so that's a C+, I guess. Simply because Capcom could have just given us a remake of the Outbreak series and maybe added the Mastermind mode as a new feature. Hell, I would have even played the crap out of it and maybe 20 on micros because I did enjoy playing the game, so oh well, another missed opportunity there.
Boost my bottom!
I'm boosting!
Boost my bottom!
Whew. Now that I talked about like every Resident Evil games, well except for RE8 because I'm still replaying it and I'm planning to make a separate video on that, so stay tuned.
Everyone has a special ingredient that helps them save the day. What's yours?
Man blood.
Though I am really curious to know what your guys' ratings for all these RE games, so let me know down in the comments down below, guys. Now to answer the main question of the video, is Resident Evil a masterpiece? Well, it's safe to say that Resident Evil is one of those series that every gamer has heard at least a few times. There are many ways or factors that make a game a name in history, but the fact is that not all good, lasting games are necessarily flowing. Resident Evil is undoubtedly one of the most influential franchises in history. The games in this series, in addition to performing well in various fields such as gameplay, story, and characterization, have defined standards that have been used in many other games, especially when we talk about the horror genre, which Resident Evil does have a big historical role in that genre, and they also have a lot of memorable characters. The creators of this series have created very attractive characters over time and that the audience can easily communicate with. In other games, the audience usually are interested in one or two of the game's character, and the creators use the same characters in the later versions of their game. But Resident Evil is not enough for one character and introduces a collection of cool characters to the audience. I mean, we were introduced to Resident Evil as Chris Redfield, despite the high popularity of this character. In the second version of the game, the creators have decided to use two other characters, Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield, as playable characters. They even added a mysterious character named Ada Wong to the list of characters in the series. Again, despite the fact that all these characters quickly become popular with the gamers, Capcom even introduced to us Jill Valentine in the third version. Not only are the game's main characters one by one more interesting, but the series has also been the birthplace of enduring negative characters such as Albert Wesker, Ramon Salazar, and most recently, Lady Dimitrescu or Big Booba Mama.
Well, Ethan Winters.
Yes!
You escaped my little brother's idiot games, did you?
Yes!
Let's see how special you are.
Come to Papa!
Wake up! Wake up!
Usually, to tell a story, you need characters that the audience can relate to. The creators of Resident Evil have a collection of these characters that they use at the right time and place. This issue does not end only with the games of this series, and the animations made from this series has always hosted different characters from this series. While Resident Evil franchise has never been in the category of a few hundred hours of role-playing games, it does not necessarily require a lot of characters, but the creators have made each version of the franchise have a different atmosphere. Their success in creating memorable characters can be clearly seen in the 7th and 8th version of the series, where the audience feels safe and encouraged to see Chris Redfield again. I mean, even making a sequel is a very common and accepted task in the world of video games. You can see that the creators have even made new sequels for games like God of War, The Last of Us, and Red Dead Redemption that seem to be over. In the case of Resident Evil, the creators have always been more open. The story of the series has not reached an absolute end at any point to date. Trail building is commercially wise and a lucrative business, but it's not the only reason to build a trail. Making a sequence usually causes a series to mature. For example, put Uncharted 4 next to Uncharted 1, or Final Fantasy 7 next to the previous versions. What you will see is a gentle upward slope that has peaked at one point. The same thing has happened with Resident Evil in its 4th edition, and this does not mean that pre-Resident Evil 4 versions are little value or they're not good games. As I stated a while ago, 1, 2, and 3 are phenomenal games. My point is that all of the efforts eventually evolved in the 4th version, creating one of the best video games ever or in history. On the other hand, the gaming industry is always evolving. If a major publisher comes out and now creates a technically high quality Resident Evil 2 game, not only will it be admired, it will also be probably attacked by critics. This is a little different in an industry like cinema, because in cinema you can still compare films like The Godfather or Shawshank Salvation with works made in recent years. Of course, in the film industry, with the evolution of technology, undeniable advancements have been made, but video games are more directly dependent on technology. Therefore, in order for a name of a series to survive, it is necessary for the developers to produce and release newer games from that said series. The makers of Resident Evil have always done this well since 1996. 28 games called Resident Evil have been released for various consoles, most of which have high build quality. Consistency and high quality together are a very powerful and effective combination for the durability and popularity of a work. With the release of each new versions, more people become familiar with the series and become a fan of the series. The popularity of this series has reached such a level that neither the creators like to end this big money making franchise, nor the audience likes to think about the ending of this franchise. I mean, with the recent Netflix adaptation of Resident Evil, or whatever the fuck you call that, and the success of RE8,
Are
you lost, baby girl?
I just don't see this franchise ending. I mean, would you like to live in a world where Resident Evil can no longer exist or can no longer be built again? And I can tell this is gonna be like a 50-50 split. But to answer the final question, is Resident Evil a masterpiece? Well, short answer, yes. Long one, well, did you not watch my video? But to sum it all up, originality is something else. It is impossible for you to produce a title that creates a stream by mere imitation. Of course, modeling and using the strengths of other games is what every smart game maker does. But it is the new ideas that ultimately distinguish good games from great games and great games from streaming games. I mean, whether you like it or not, Resident Evil is an original game, and this originality can be seen in all elements of the game, from typewriters to saving game storages to using herbs called herbs to fill out health bars, from enemies like Nemesis to Mr. X to secret inventory bags, from lovable characters to stories of an imaginary company called Umbrella, all the signatures of tasteful creators. These are all the series that make an audience immerse themselves in the game and have a unique experience. Even innovative ideas such as the shoulder cam in the Resident Evil 4 game spreads to other games and quickly became the standard of the entire gaming industry. The roles of these big and small points in the popularity of the Resident Evil series is just undeniably great. And yes, I know not all the Resident Evil games are a massive hit, but oh boy, when they do hit, they leave a big cultural significance in the world of gaming. So to end this video, Resident Evil is a pure masterpiece. Well, except for this one, but you know what I mean. But what do you think? Is Resident Evil a masterpiece to you? Let me know in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe, share this with your friends, and I'll see you soon on the next video. Stay safe, guys.